Well, hello, folks. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian whistleblower, and this is NCK Live. And actually, as I adjust my volume just a little bit so I don't blow you away, it is actually NCK Center Live for real. It looks like I'm off of YouTube timeout, and we can actually do a live broadcast for you again. And we try to do this every Sunday. And it's just basically a time of get together, a time of fellowship, a time of where we can encourage one another, where we can talk to one another. If you have any questions, you can put in, on the chat right now and ask a question. And that's what we're here for, is really just to talk. I should have made a more of an announcement of this, but just didn't do so. Wasn't sure, quite frankly, that it was going to work. But if you do have questions, feel free to go ahead and ask them. And if not, well, next week you'll know that we will be live once again. And we've been doing a lot of content this week, a lot of new videos this week, and we're doing a lot of things on my website at jeffreydaugherty.com, christianwhistleblower.com. If you go there and look, you'll see that we do have a weekly schedule now for all of the different teachings that we're doing. We're trying to step it up to a new level. We're trying to give you teachings that, and these are all playlists. If you go to the one video, you can see that there are playlists for all of these different types of teachings. And we're trying to get ourselves to a place where we're getting deep, where we are unindoctrinating, and where we're coming to a higher and a deeper understanding of what's going on. We also have a sale on all of my ebooks. If you've been wondering about some of the things I teach or wanting to know some more of the depth, well, all the ebooks, which some of them have been up to $12, they're all on sale right now for $250 through Christmas time, $250, $25. So you can take advantage of that. And we also just released a new ebook about spirit cooking, the Eucharist, and communion. And we encourage you to take advantage of that one. That one is $5 because it is brand new. But other than that, they are just $250 for all of the ebooks, including the Diamond New Testament, including Apostle Antichrist, including a Final Message of the Last Apostle. So some of our most popular titles. I also just did some more work on a serpents and doves in the Garden of the Gods. And I just did some new work on that, and I think we're going to be featuring that on Coast to Coast AM very soon, talking about the real story of biblical creation and taking a look at the reptilian human question. So it's something that's very, very interesting. And just for a few minutes today, I wanted to talk to you about something that's been hitting the news, this idea of fake news. And the way it's been positioned to us is that there are people like me and like you that are circumventing the mainstream media and are daring to actually put out our own understandings, our own visions, our own ways of thinking. Now, of course, I don't deal with things political very much, and I think that this is mostly aimed at those that are putting out political commentary and news on political events. I don't do that, except on very rare occasions. But it's only a matter of time before they turn their wrath on people like me that are putting out information that goes against the dominant religious paradigm. And you have to realize the people yelling about fake news are the people that are wanting to control the narrative. They don't want there to be competing views out there. They don't want there to be people that are able to go on YouTube and broadcast worldwide at the click of a few buttons information, opinions that are outside those of the dominant paradigm. And that's what the real outcry about fake news is. Is there some fake news out there? Are there people making things up just to make things up? Certainly there are. And you have to remember that there are, even in mainstream media, you have things that are parody news broadcasts. And of course, the question is, if the mainstream media is allowed to do parody news broadcasts, why couldn't someone that's not in the mainstream media do parody news broadcasts? But what I really want to talk about is that fake news isn't anything new. Fake news has been around for at least some 2,000 years, and fake news has always been employed to control the narrative, and it's always been employed to silence people that speak against the dominant narrative, whether it be political, whether it be religious, and many times even dominant social narratives. And if you look at the original New Testament times, I mean, we are victims of a huge fake news application with the New Testament. The New Testament, as we know it, is a almost completely 100% fraudulent document. As I pull mine out, and people, ask me, well, Jeff, if it's such a fraudulent document, why do you even continue to talk about it? Why do you even continue to hold it up or look at it? Because I think Thomas Jefferson said it the best. Contained within the New Testament, and really the entire Bible, but contained within the New Testament, there are diamonds of tremendous spiritual teaching and understanding. And there's also lots and lots of dung, which is nothing but the opinions, the machinations, the outright intentional misleading of people. And the big thing is that you look at, well, that's an old Bible, isn't it? That's the one I've taught it from for many, many years. If you look at the New Testament, if you look at the Bible, I want to talk to you about fake news. And if you want to talk about fake news, let me give you a great example of fake news. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Thessalonians, Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Hebrew, James, Peter, John, Jude, Revelation. That's a great example of fake news. Somebody said, Jeff, what are you talking about? Fake news. That order of books is 100% fake. And think about it. This is a collection of books that they know pretty much within a few years when these things were written, especially so the New Testament. They know when the New Testament was written. They know when the New Testament books were published. And they also know that the order in which they've compiled these books is fraudulent. It's fake. The compilation of the New Testament is fake news. Let me just blow your mind a little bit. The book of Matthew, which is listed as, and I mean, look at this. I mean, this is just a table of contents, and look at the kind of notes and stuff that I've got in this thing. It's like that every page, but that represents, 35 years of study and whatnot. But table of contents annotated like that. Could you imagine? You don't even want to see the book of Revelation and the annotations there. Trust me. But Matthew, which they say is first, was actually the 11th book published. Mark, which they say is second, was actually the 5th book published. Luke, which they say was third, was actually 9th. John, which they say was 4th, was actually 13th. Acts, which they say is 5th, is 10. Romans, which they say is 6, actually was 6. They got one right. Corinthians, which they say were about 7th, were really 4th, including Galatians. And then the Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians were really the 8th books written. Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 2nd and 3rd books written. And they're way down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. They're really the 2nd and 3rd books written. Timothy was the 12th books written, and it's down in 15. Philemon was the 8th book written. It's in place like 16. Hebrews was the 12th book written. It's in place 17. And lo and behold, the book of James, which was really the first book written, the first book published, is in position about 19. And then Peter, which was 7, is in 20. And then the books of John are at the very end. And that is pretty much right, because they were the ones in the very end. They were written actually after a period of some 40 or 50 years. So if you want to talk fake news, your New Testament is fake news 100%. And why in the world would you take I don't know if you can really see that or if you can read it, but there's your order. And I've got a nice piece that I can send out to you if you ask me that talks about all this. But there's your order of books. And there's the order that they've been placed in. And you say, well, why? It makes no sense to intentionally misorder a collection of books that you know 100% when they were written. And I guarantee you, I'm not the only one that knows when these books were written. I am, however, the only one that's placed them in their correct chronological order. And we do have that in the Diamond New Testament. It has the books in their correct chronological order, and that's something, ebook, you can get again for $250 right now. The Diamond New Testament has the books in their correct chronological order, and their correct chronological order is very clearly stated right there. That's the correct chronological order of the books of the New Testament, with the ones of Paul taken out. James, 1 Peter, 2 Peter, Mark, Luke, Acts. Luke and Acts were actually one book. Matthew, Jude, John, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and the Revelation. This is actually an older version of the Diamond New Testament. The new one has it in columns, just like you're used to reading the Bible. But when you think about the New Testament, then the one without any dung in it's only that thick. But that's a great example of fake news. Fake news by people that want to control the narrative. Because what happens when you misorder the books is you are deprived of knowing what was actually happening. What was actually happening in the New Testament was that James started writing in AD 47 to sound the alarm about Paul being a false apostle. So James writes in AD 47. He published in AD 47. We don't know when he wrote, but James published in AD 47 the book of James. And it clearly was written to call out Paul and say that Paul is a false apostle. And then in AD 52 and 53, Paul wrote 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians. And 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians are an answer to James' rebuke of him. And if you notice on our website, we are doing a new series called the Diamond New Testament Commentary. And I'm actually going to put that into print. This is just the Diamond New Testament, but we're going to take the Diamond New Testament, have the verses, then we'll have commentary on them right within the Diamond New Testament. And I'm actually going to include, you can see a little cool reflection. I'm actually going to include the books of Paul, the writings of Paul, in the Diamond New Testament commentary as it relates to what's being talked about by the apostles. So as Paul answers back directly to accusations made by James, for example, we'll have those scriptures and we'll have discussion of those scriptures. But James first wrote and said Paul is a lying rat bastard. Paul basically writes back and says, no, I'm not. You're bad. And then after 1 and 2 Thessalonians are written, Paul pours it on and also writes the books of 1 and 2 Corinthians and Galatians. You know, he overreacts because that's how liars do. When a liar gets accused, a liar will typically overreact and talk even more. So James writes his book, first book of the New Testament, in AD 47. Paul follows with 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, and Galatians in short order, just bam, 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 answering what James had accused him of in his book. And then comes the book of Mark in AD right around the same time Paul was writing, somewhere between 57 and 63. And Mark starts to give the first chronological record of the gospel of Yeshua, because Paul was saying, no, 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 this is the real gospel of Yeshua. James is saying, you're preaching falsehood. Then Paul says, no, this is the real gospel. And then Mark responds with the first talk of the gospel of Yeshua, not the gospel about Yeshua, because that's what Paul was preaching, a gospel about Yeshua. But Mark responds with the gospel of Yeshua. And we have another teaching series on the website, which is called Yeshua Unscripted, the original teachings in their chronological order. And it starts with, guess what? The book of Mark, because those were the first published teachings of Yeshua. We're not talking about what people thought about Yeshua, what people said about Yeshua, but the words that came out of his mouth. I'm reminded of that Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker movie. Can you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Well, that's what Yeshua is saying. Can you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? We focus on the words coming out of Yeshua's mouth. That's the original Yeshua Unscripted, the original teachings. And again, every week we have new episodes of that out there. So James, and then 5 books. Is it 5? First, Second Thessalonians, Corinthians, the 2 Corinthians, and Galatians. 5 books by Paul. Then Mark writes back from the apostolic perspective with the Gospel of Mark. And then guess what happens? Paul responds with his great opus, the book of Romans, again in response and attack of what the apostles said about him. And then after Paul responds with the book of Romans, then Peter feels compelled to respond with 1 Peter. And then after that, here comes Paul again with Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians, and the book of Philemon, blasting back. And then after that, here comes the apostles again with the Gospel of Luke and Acts of the Apostles. Luke and Acts was actually the same book. So then Luke and the apostles respond with the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts. And also the book of Matthew came out about the same time. And then Paul responds again with 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus, and Hebrews. And then the apostles respond after that, and it's been about 40 or 50 years, 60 years, and John responds with his writings, the Gospels of John and the book of Revelation. Can you see when you look at when you put away the fake news fed to you, and think about it, this fake news is not fed to you by the Democratic Party. This fake news is not fed to you by the Republican Party. This fake news is not fed to you by the alt-right. This fake news is not coming to you from some conspiracy theorist. The fake news of the fake New Testament order is coming to you from the Roman Catholic and the Roman Protestant Church. It's coming to you by the dominant religious paradigm. And as I've just shown you, the New Testament was really a back and forth. The apostles write, Paul writes, the apostles write, Paul writes, the apostles write, Paul writes, then John sums it all up after 60 years. So I mean, it's like you've got the UFC coming up, and it's like a UFC match. James hits Paul, boom. Paul responds, and then the apostles hit, and then Paul responds. Then that's what it was. The New Testament was a bare knuckle theological battle between the forces of the original Yeshua movement and the forces of the Apostle Paul. It was a bare knuckle fight for the hearts and minds of the world. Quite frankly, a fight that the original Yeshua movement lost. In reality, Paul, boom, knocked out. Paul knocked out the original Yeshua movement, in effect, because he was able, through the dominant political paradigms of the day and religious paradigms, to knock out the Yeshua movement, to really remove the Yeshua movement. And then, of course, the big knockout blow came in AD 70 when the Roman army under Titus destroyed Jerusalem and effectively destroyed the original Yeshua movement, because the strength of the Yeshua movement was that they had Jerusalem completely converted, basically, and their entire power base was in Jerusalem, which seems like a good thing. But it wasn't a good thing when Jerusalem was destroyed. And if not for the Dead Sea Scrolls and some of the other writings that came out, and guess what? We have a teaching on the Nag Hammadi scriptures as well that contains much of the gospel and understanding of the original Yeshua movement. We would have never known any of this. So you want to talk about fake news? There's some fake news for you. The New Testament order of books is fake news. And to be frank with you, Paul wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, so most of the New Testament itself is fake news. And even most of the books that weren't written by Paul are fake news. I know you don't like to hear that. I know you don't like to consider that. And I know you're probably saying, who are you to make such statements? Well, let me just give you an idea of what someone that maybe you have more respect for than me had to say about it. Thomas Jefferson wrote to William Short on April 13th, 1820. Thomas Jefferson, third president of the United States, author of the Declaration of Independence. People say, oh, well, Jefferson did this, Jefferson did that. First of all, it's speculation. Nobody knows what he did or did not do. But the man wrote the Declaration of Independence. The man was part of the core of people that led the United States out of bondage to the people of England, said no to the king, and actually led us to liberty and freedom, and set in order a system that would allow the greatest liberty of humanity possible. It hasn't worked out the way they thought it would, but this is what Jefferson said. Among the sayings and discourses, and I'm reading from the introduction of the Diamond New Testament, among the sayings and discourses imputed to him, talking about Yeshua, by his biographers, I find many passages of fine imagination, correct morality, and of the most lovely benevolence. That's the diamond of the New Testament. That's the diamond of the Bible. And Jefferson's right. There are many passages of fine imagination. There are many passages of correct morality. There are many passages of the most lovely benevolence. And that's what we talk about when we talk about the Diamond New Testament, when we do these programs, and when we do these going on 400 videos we have. That's what we're talking about. Then Jefferson also said, and there are others again of so much ignorance, so much absurdity, so much untruth, so much charlatanism and imposture, as to pronounce it impossible that such contradiction should have proceeded from the same being. I separate, therefore, the gold from the dross, restoring to Yeshua the former, and leave the latter to the stupidity of some. Some of you get mad at me for using words like stupidity. Jefferson called a spade too, because it is stupidity. The stupidity of some, the roguery of others, of his followers. Of this band of dupes and impostors, Paul was the great Coryphaeus, the first corrupter of the doctrines of Yeshua. These palpable interpolations and falsifications of his doctrines led me to try to sift them apart. Same thing that I'm doing. Yes, the New Testament does have a lot of those great things, and it does have a lot of ignorance. It does have a lot of absurdity. It does have a lot of untruth, charlatanism, imposture, stupidity. That it didn't come from Yeshua. It came from liars, cheaters, rat bastards, fake news. So when you hear the term fake news bandied about, and you hear people complaining about fake news, and you hear this whole discussion, keep in mind where the first fake news came from when you're talking about our Western society. Keep in mind where the first lying rat bastards who sought to control the agenda and to obscure the real. Look at some of the stuff I'm doing. You know, you talk about study. Oh, there's no way you've got 100,000 hours of Bible study. Listen, bro. This is where stupidity and absurdity comes in. You see this stuff right here, man? This is all stuff. I mean, this isn't even planned. I just pulled this out of my thing, you know, my little desk here. This is just this week, you know, looking and teaching right here. Little pad, big pad, for, you know, just little stuff this week. Some of it's private. I don't want to show you. Oh, well, look at this. Another big pad. And, you know, right, we got more teachings right here, more study right here too. So they say, oh, there's no way you got 100. I've been doing this for 35 years. And 100,000 hours of biblical study is probably a conservative estimate. So I just want to say, shut up, shut your yap, quit saying things to me that are stupid, and the ad hominem attacks. Oh, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. Well, if you're going to comment on my videos or anything else, I want you to have facts and figures and not just insults, or it's as easy as this, bloop, delete. I know some of you don't like me saying that. Well, I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. The time is far spent, and we don't have time for political correctness. We don't have time for, you know, being not. It's time to call stupid, stupid. It's time to call absurd, absurd. It's time to call diamond, diamond, and dung, dung. And that's what we're doing. And that's NCK Live for today. A lot of you out there, a lot of you being a little shy, but I hope that you'll next week begin to ask your questions and share your comments. Go to the website, take advantage of all of the teachings there. And it's important that you subscribe if you have not subscribed. It's important to you because you'll get all the new information first. It's important to me because the more subscriptions, it drives my videos up the ranks so people can organically, which really means by accident, just surfing along, find my videos. And if you like them, you hit the thumbs up, it also drives them up. If you share them, it also drives them up. So don't be selfish. Take the time that it takes to subscribe. Take the time that it takes to like. Take the time that it takes to share, because that allows more people to be exposed to this information. Help me expose myself to more people. Of course, being a little silly there, but that's okay. And that is NCK Live for December the 18th, which really is NCK Live today. And as you hear the term fake news bandied about, remember what fake news is really all about. And all of the things that we're doing are just tools in your toolbox, arrows in your quiver, if you will, to help you in your hopes and desires and your work. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and I'm here to help you unindoctrinate yourself.